This is Boomer Time, a proactive podcast for baby boomers, about baby boomers, and for people taking care of baby boomers. If that sounds like you, then you're in the right place. I'm Nancy Kogar, an elder law attorney and aging advocate, and this podcast was made just for you. Remember, though, the things we discuss here are not intended to be legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established by this podcast. Hello, my friends out there in podcast land. Thanks for joining me. This is your host, Nancy Kogar, and this is Boomer Time. I am so glad that you've joined me today. As you know, this podcast is dedicated to talking about all issues related to aging. As I say, it's about boomers, and for people taking care of boomers. I am an estate planning and elder law attorney here in Tennessee, as you know, and I have seen too many people just plain old unprepared for aging issues. And that is why I created this podcast, to get those resources in your hands so you will be better prepared for those issues as you age. And with that, welcome to Boomer Time. If you're a boomer, or you're caring for a boomer, or just an aging adult, you're in the right place. So get comfortable, and that's what we're going to talk about here. This is episode 5, and today we are talking about responding to those holiday red flags. So a lot of us spent the holidays with our parents, and maybe we noticed some things that concerned us. Maybe we noticed a decline or some kind of circumstance that just didn't seem right. Perhaps it was memory loss of some kind, or maybe your parents had a fall while you were there, or didn't seem to negotiate the stairs or parts of the house as well anymore. Maybe they're forgetting to take their medicines, or maybe they lost their way on the way back home from the grocery store. Or perhaps their driving scared you a bit. I've been there. Now you're home and worried about whatever you experienced. The big question is, what do you do now? Well, that's what we're talking about today. I call those holiday red flags. And make no mistake, they can be very stressful. Truth is, they can indicate early stages of decline or diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and all kinds of other dementia. And if you live a far distance away from your parents, like a lot of us do now, it can only intensify those concerns about what to do next. Well, we're going to tackle some of that today. And this episode is called Responding to Those Holiday Red Flags. So stick with me, and we're going to talk about that more right after this break. Welcome back. We are talking about how to respond to those red flags that you may have noticed while visiting your older parents this holiday. First, let's talk about the perspective, or things you should look for when it comes to those red flags or warning signs that might be a sign of decline or larger or more significant issues that need attention. But before we do that, I want to differentiate between two kind of different categories, because this is what I do when I have people come into my office. Because I think it's important to kind of assess where you may be on the spectrum with your parents. So that first step is really kind of trying to determine which category you're in when it comes to the aging spectrum. So what I mean is, are you in a critical crisis planning mode, or are you in more of a long-term planning mode? That is really essential when you're starting to look at these issues. And just like it sounds, do you have some critical issue that needs attention quickly, or do you have more of a long-term planning issue? Critical planning is just like it sounds. There's a critical issue. Your parents have a welfare issue. Maybe their welfare is in danger. You have fewer options. There are things that you need to act on more quickly. You may have to look at moving them to an assisted living facility or something like that for more structured care. They may not be able to live at home. It may be that you need to meet with an attorney that specializes in estate planning, elder law, where you can get some estate planning documents in place if they're able to do that. You don't have as much time typically. And if there is, you meet with a doctor and there's some issues related to cognitive abilities, you may even be looking at needing a conservatorship or something along those lines. So with critical planning, and you find yourself in that kind of circumstance, really your options are more limited, which is often unfortunate, really, because you don't have as many options when it comes to asset management, long-term planning, trying to be more creative in what you can do to structure planning over the long haul for your parents. And that's where I really appreciate when people come in early, because we can work over a longer period to protect someone's quality of life and really look at what they'd like to do over the long term. And really, my primary objective oftentimes is to look at preventing them from ending up in a nursing home. And trying to keep them staying at home with the family, as long as possible. So I just wanted to mention that first off, because I think, determining that category is really essential. So obviously, with that kind of emergency response, you need to respond more quickly. And, as I've said, you don't have as many options. As an attorney, I usually see that either in the form of a family acting with the parents' consent, along with a physician to get some immediate help and support in place. And as I said, sometimes it requires a form of court action with a petition for conservatorship to ask the court to place court-ordered support in place for a parent who's found to be disabled. At that point, there may be some hospitalization or a move to a memory care unit or nursing home. That's what I often see in that, honestly. As I've mentioned with the crisis care response, the list of options is not as lengthy. The legal options are, honestly, more expensive. And having the court overseeing those decisions is difficult. I encourage you to be able to handle your own planning if you can. And that always comes with dealing with it earlier. That is the key. So, as I mentioned up front, this episode is going to focus more on the long-term planning. So as you're back from that holiday visit and you take time to assess what you saw with your parents, I want you to really think about that long-term planning and think about how you can put a plan in place to think about how you might help your parents to help maintain their quality of life, and maybe start to think about how you could put a care plan in place for them. So we're going to take another quick break. And when we do come back, I'm going to go over some questions and some areas that I just want you to start thinking about. And I think this will help you to start thinking about how you might start developing that care plan and assessment. So I'll be right back. I'm back. This is Nancy Kogar, and this is Boomer Time. Hey, I just wanted to remind you, if you have time, to go ahead and visit my website. It's easy to find. If you know my name, nancykogar.com is the website address. So check it out if you get a chance. There are lots of resources there. And as I've said before, I love resources. So I try to just put lots of resources there. And I will have the show notes from today's episode there too. So if you want to print those out, all the questions that we're going to go over in just a little bit will be there for you. I have all kinds of other things too. And you can contact me with a question if you have a question. And I may feature that question on a future podcast. I love getting questions. So think about it. Also, I've got a great newsletter. It's called Elder Law News You Can Use, and I get lots of great feedback about that. So you can subscribe to that at the website too. So I encourage you to go there. All right. So we are talking about long-term planning and questions and things you should assess looking at your parents' condition and trying to working towards a care plan for those holiday red flags. It is overwhelming. I want to say that. It is something that's hard to pare down. It's complex, and there are lots of different issues here. So I'm not saying these are the only things that you should look at, but these are things that can start to give you a snapshot of things that may be identifiable to help your parents. Okay? That's the reason for this. So I want to start with, first of all, think about the condition of your parents' home. Now, I know everybody's different, but take this in context related to how your parents have kept up their house over the years. You know, some parents, their house is immaculate, okay? You know, Dad cut the lawn with the lines that, you could have put a ruler on it and measured it. The house is just completely perfect. Maybe you're starting to see things are not as perfect as they used to be. Have you seen a change in their habits when it comes to the upkeep and maintenance of the home? That can be a really good indicator. And in that, what kinds of repairs and maintenance are you seeing needed to the home? Inside the house, here's a good one. How much paperwork and bills and even unopened mail is accumulating in the house? That can be a really good sign that they're not able to keep up with things. What's the condition inside the house? Is it as clean as it used to be? Are your parents as clean as they used to be? Are they showering? Are they wearing clean clothes? Do they look like they're wearing the same clothes over and over again? These are real good indicators. In the kitchen, you want to examine the food in the cupboard. Is there food in the cupboard? What does the refrigerator look like? The freezer? How much food is in there? Are things out of date? Is the freezer filled with old frozen dinners? Especially if you have a mother that used to, have a practice of cooking. Is she even cooking anymore? That is a real sign. There may be a reason why she's not cooking anymore. And you can help by trying to put some things in place for them to have better nutrition. Malnutrition is a huge issue that can lead to decline, even if it's not related to some other kind of greater disease. So if they're in a neighborhood where you're familiar with the neighbors, you can check in with their friends and neighbors, maybe people at church that they know, that if you had an opportunity to speak with them, check in, see if they've noticed anything, see if they have concerns. Maybe they haven't been in church in a while. That's possible. They may not want to interfere, but if you know them well enough, they may disclose some things to you if they're really concerned. During the holidays, there may have been some social situations. How did your parents act in those social situations? Were they engaged? Were they involved? Did they participate? Were they present? Did they seem aware, or did they draw back? Were they kind of withdrawn or isolated? That can be an indicator. They may not be able to hear as well. Maybe there's some depression there. It may be something going on. Look for opportunities to meet with their physicians. I always say this is a good one because you can try to have medical appointments while you're visiting. This is a frustrating thing when I meet with children who are caring for their parents. Due to those confidentiality and the new HIPAA requirements, you may think, you start calling your parents' doctors and the staff, and they're not going to tell you anything. They're restricted from talking with you without your parents' authorization. This could be a frustrating thing. If you go to the appointments with them, you're more successful when that happens. But otherwise, you're going to need a healthcare power of attorney from an estate planning attorney or an elder law attorney before you start getting any of that information. You're going to need a release. They're just not allowed to share that information. The one I touched on before, which was a personal scary bot for me, driving. Okay, this is a huge issue, and I'm going to have a whole episode on driving. You can make arrangements for their physician to examine them when it comes to driving. Here in Chattanooga, Siskin has the opportunity to have a driving test that you can have your parents take. It measures their response actually driving. So you don't have to be the bad guy. You can get the doctor to give them a prescription for a driving test. And if they fail, guess what? No driving. So we're going to try to have Siskin on here talk more about that. That's a huge issue, especially with the way other people drive on the roads. If you've got limited response time, it just makes for a terrible combination. The physician can order that driving test to assess the ability to drive and take you out of the equation. That's helpful. And then there's alternatives. You can have third parties come in and offer support to help with errands and trips to the medical doctors and things like that. So there are options, but we're talking about assessment today. Here's a good one. Have your parents lost weight? Are their pants falling off? Are their belts cinched really tight? I've seen that before. That can be a sign of depression or serious illness, or even, quite frankly, a symptom that their medicines may be out of whack. Diabetes is a huge issue, and that can make you go one way or the other. If you see that, I would definitely schedule a visit with their physician. And then finally, balance. Falling is a huge issue. So pay attention to how your parents were moving, especially how they walk. If they're unsteady on their feet, maybe there's a risk of falling, which is a serious problem that can cause injury, even worse. Also, look for bruises, contusions, Band-Aids, anything like that on their body, okay? That can be a sign of previous falls. So there are things you can do to help them improve their balance and strength. Their physician can also prescribe physical therapy, and that can improve balance. And guess what? Medicare can cover the cost of that. And, you can put handrails into showers and near stairs and toilets. There's all kinds of tools that can be installed in the homes, help with balance issues. So, this, like I said, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are kind of observations that you can make to start thinking about, where did my parents need some help? And then that's the conversation after you start to assess these things. It gives you the opportunity to sit down and talk about, hey, mom and dad, hey, I noticed maybe the mail's accumulating. You need some help with paying the bills? I can help you with that, and maybe we get something online, or we get a power of attorney. I can help you pay the bills and help you with that, or how about I help you clean the gutters on the roof? You're 78 now. I don't want you to be climbing up on that roof, and given the condition of your parents' home, I've often had conversations with my clients about spend down items, as far as long-term care. There are some, you may be surprised, a long list of what they call spend down items for long-term planning and potential Medicaid spend down items, which we can talk more about that. But, things you can do to the house to make it more livable for your parents, safer, that can be spent in order to keep them in the house longer. And that may be something that you want to look at. And then, again, with weight loss, I sit down with them and say, hey, Mom, Dad, I noticed, you've lost some weight. I'm worried about you. Why don't we try to get some food delivery service in here? Publix or any of those grocery stores, they have food delivered very easily. So, that's the good thing. There's some services available that can really help with some of these things, even if you live 100 miles away. So, I think you will find that if you start thinking creatively and just think about those items that you can observe, you can really put some things in place that would give you some peace of mind and help your parents. So I hope you find this helpful today. So we are going to talk about all these things, in greater depth as we move forward. But I mean this to be something that give you some power to be able to move beyond your stress and anxiety and be able to help your parents. That's always the best thing. All right. So I am going to take a quick breakity break. And then when I come back, we are going to share some final thoughts. And then, as you know, I always like to share some encouragement. And I got some really great letters from some clients over the holiday, and I just want to talk about those. So be right back. So I hope you found this helpful. I know I find these kinds of things helpful because, you when you look at something as complex as an issue like this, it's hard to focus on one thing. So if you have an itemized list of different facets of a problem, I find it helps me to break it down. So that's what I'm hoping it does for you. But if you found it helpful, or if you have some thoughts about it, give me a jingle on my website. Let me know what you think. Or if you've got a question, let me know what the question is. I always love to hear from my people out there. My website is nancykogar.com. So if you've got a question, let me know what it is. I also just like hearing people's thoughts. I get all kinds of letters from my clients, and I got a few over the holiday that really touched my heart. I've got one from an older client of mine, and she just shared, about where she is in her life, and it was just so beautiful. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me right now, but I do remember what she said. She was talking about how everyone, kept saying she was in her sunset years and, towards the end of her life. And she was saying she felt like a little pansy, like a flower. But how everybody says pansies are weak. She said she sees pansies as a hardy flower because they stand up so strong. And even in the wintertime, when they have snow on them, you've seen them like that. She said they're such a strong and cheerful flower. So she just thought she was going to be a cheerful flower in the winter of her life. And I just thought, that's so beautiful. And she's such a blessing. So I thought that was sweet. And then another one of my clients who had a husband that passed away, she wrote me to just tell me that how helpful it was to have the estate planning documents that we had done together. In particular, the powers of attorney, that I have very specific power of attorneys that have all kinds of elements in them that I see come up often with aging adults. And she just said to me, Nancy, I was just so glad to have that power of attorney. It made all the difference in the world. And it was just so helpful. I mean, it wasn't easy when my husband passed away, but it was just so helpful to have that with me. It made it easier, if that's possible. So that means so much to me. It really does, because I do what I do because I want to be an advocate for people. This is not easy stuff. It's not easy stuff. Sometimes you don't hear how you help. So I just wanted to share that. And as you know, I am a person of faith. So I like to share encouragement, and I believe in the power of prayer. So that's what I do when I end each show. So if you're finding yourself after the holidays in a situation where maybe you've experienced some change with your parents, and maybe it threw you, and maybe it created some anxiety, and maybe you just, quite frankly, don't know what to do, or maybe the rest of the family's not supporting you, I just would just say that I pray tonight that the Lord would just give you peace of mind and clarity, and that the tools that were offered today would just help you in being able to sort through the anxiety and the confusion and the clouded jumble that may be in your brain and in your heart, and that you would find a way to be able to sort through all of this, and that you just would be able to focus on what's the most important thing, and that you would have the ability to communicate with your parents and with any siblings and other people that are involved, and be able to communicate that well. And I just ask for that in the Lord's name for you. Amen. So peace is important. We don't have a lot of that in this world anymore. So I just pray peace over you. Right? Yeah. Amen, right? My engineer extraordinaire Nay is giving me the thumbs up. Yes. Couldn't do it without you, Nay. So glad you're on my side. All right. So this wraps up another podcast. Glad to be here, and thanks for listening to me. Couldn't do it without you either out there. So I hope you will check us out on the website, nancykogar.com, and subscribe to our newsletter, and look for us on Facebook. We have a Boomer Time Facebook site. And of course, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Tell a friend about us too. Okay? I'm here for you, and we're going to get through this together on Boomer Time. See ya.